Where are the least reached areas in the United States? That is a question that I hope to answer in this video. Hey folks, I'm JD Payne. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. Last week in Orlando at the Great Commission Research Network Gathering and the Exponential Conference, I released a study that my team and I put together on the least reached areas in the United States. And in this video, I not only want to tell you about that, but I want to give the information away to you, and I want to provide you with access to an incredible online interactive map that you can use to also guide your thinking, prayers, and future church planting activities in this country. So let me give you a little bit of backstory here. So back in 2009, some of you that have been tracking with me for several years, you know that I released a study on evangelical concentrations. And it was based on the best data at the time. The data was from the year 2000. However, another religious census was taken in 2010, and then the most current one in 2020. And during those 2 decades, after they came and went, and the data was released and put out there, I made an all-call that someone would pick up this opportunity and would do a better job doing the research and visualizing this and putting it together and getting it out there to churches for their ministries. To my knowledge, no one listened to me. So while the data from the most current religious census has been published and made available online since 2023 and also in book form, to my knowledge, no one has done this. So my team and I decided that we would do that and get it out to everyone, even though it is the year 2026. So maybe, Lord willing, in 2030, one of you watching this will do a better job than what we did with the 2020 data. So what's in the study? Well, basically what we did was we looked at the evangelical percentages across the United States. We wanted to know where were the least reached metro areas, and so we looked at the 50 areas that were less than or equal to 5% evangelical. We wanted to know about the least reached counties. We looked at areas that were less than or equal to 3% evangelical, narrowed that down to about 100 counties in this country. We also wanted to see where were states experiencing growth and seeing people coming to faith. And so we looked at data from 1980 all the way up to 2020, and we looked at those states that actually saw some fairly important and encouraging growth that is taking place in and among their borders. Another thing that we looked at in this study was that we wanted to look at evangelical church to population ratios. We wanted to know the evangelical churches to the populations in the states, the counties, and in the metro areas to get an idea of the number of churches faithfully sharing the gospel, we hope, to the population that is there. Now, from a strategic perspective, missiologists have for the longest time advocated one evangelical church for every 1,000 people in an urban area and one evangelical church for every 500 people in a rural context. So when you begin to look at the numbers here and you look at some of these charts and some of these maps, you can begin to kind of think about that in light of 1 to 1,000 for a city, 1 to 500 for a rural area. We also wanted to know about the foreign-born populations within this country. And while this information is not contained at the ARDA, nor was the information on the evangelical church to population ratios, my team and I worked together to get all of this put together so that you could be able to have access to that. And we'll be talking about that more, or I'll be talking about more about that in just a moment. The one thing about the foreign-born population that I think is important for us to keep in mind is that while the U.S. government does not track information on people groups, it does track information on nationalities of birth. And so one of the things that we are thinking about in these least reached areas, and we look at the foreign-born populations as they're overlaid on top of these least reached areas, we're asking the question, is it possible that someone from some unreached people groups could be residing there in some of the least reached areas within this country? So what are the resources that I'm giving to you? Well, I'm going to link them below in the description to this video. But basically, I want you to have the Excel file. So for those of you that like numbers and like stats, you nerdy missiologists, you can take that information and use it for your research in days to come. But also, I want to give you the infographics that I'm sharing with you in this video. I want you to be able to have access to them. I want you to be able to use them to cast vision. I want you to be able to give those away. So I want you to be able to communicate well to the people that are on your teams in what the Lord may be leading you and your church and your ministries to engage in. The last thing, and I'm going to share some more details about this in just a moment, is that I want you to have the link to the online interactive map. This is a fantastic resource that Brent Waldrop and his team with the International Mission Board put together. They took our data that my team and I at Samford University compiled. They used it to create this incredible resource to help us get an idea of those realities and be able to see it in such a way that really resonates and connects with us. And at the same time, where we could see that foreign-born population residing within those communities as well. So where is the data found? What is the source of what you have access to? Well, the data is based on a religious census that takes place every 10 years within this country. And that information is generally housed at the ARDA.com. The ARDA stands for the Association of Religion Data Archives. And in 2023, the data from the 20 study was actually published. It was actually published not only online at the ARDA, but at the same time, it was published in a book by Clifford Gramitz and others within his team that compiled this research into the volume known as the 2020 U.S. Religion Census, Religious Congregations and Membership Study. So if it had not been for Gramitz and the other researchers on this team, this would not be possible for us to be able to take this information and communicate it to you for your ministries in the present and in the future. But the information has been at the ARDA for quite some time, and so just want you to be able to understand that the source is out there. It's available for others to check out. So if you have questions with what you see with us, check out their site, see what's there. Look at the other information they have also on that resource for you. So why evangelical? Well, evangelical has been a long-standard kind of yardstick for missiologists to look at the global population and say kind of what is the least common denominator? If you're wanting to know people who would say that they have repented of their sin and placed their faith in Christ, would you raise your hand in the group? We know that those by definition would do that. It doesn't mean that those that are in other Christian traditions, Christian faith, if you will, that may not go by that label. It doesn't mean that there are no believers there, nor does it say that everyone who's evangelical is a follower of Christ. It just means that when you're trying to study the third largest country in the world, you have to have some kind of benchmark, some kind of yardstick to sort of help you think through how do you get an idea or an understanding of lostness in an area. And so evangelical has often been that particular measurement. Now, for the ARDA defines an evangelical as really in the category of evangelical Protestant. They've also referred to this group as conservative Protestants, and they define those that would be in that group as Protestant denominations and churches that emphasize conversion and evangelism, hold biblical authority in high regard, and tend to seek more separation from the broader culture. They're usually seen as more theologically and socially conservative than mainline Protestantism. So what are the findings that we have for you? Well, first of all, the Pew Research Center basically has the United States as about 23% evangelical. Now, that's a good kind of number to keep in mind because, as you see from our study, there are states that are much higher than 23% evangelical and states that are much lower than 23% evangelical. You also have here the evangelical church to population ratios in these various states. We were also curious about the metro areas. And so what were the metro areas, particularly those that had populations of 500,000 or more that were less than or equal to 5% evangelical, in addition to the 50 least reached metro areas. We also looked at metro areas that were less than or equal to 3% evangelical and looked at the lowest church to population ratios that were there. We wanted to take a look at the 100 least evangelical counties. We focused in on counties that had populations of 50,000 or more that were less than or equal to 2% evangelical. Now, some of these counties obviously are much smaller than 50,000 in population, but we wanted to note there are counties with sizable populations that have very low percentages of evangelicals. Now, this particular note is worth considering, and that is the growth from 1980 up until 2020. So what states experienced really encouraging growth among evangelicals? And here's what you see. Now, I have not had a chance to dig into the possible reasons for this growth. However, as I've spoken to some people living in these communities, and this is just anecdotal evidence, they have suggested very encouraging things that the Lord is doing. But there are three things that come to my mind as far as what could be driving these numbers up, and it could be one or it could be all or two of these particular things. One, it could be that this is just reporting error. So a denomination, a group that was not reporting in 1980 or 1990 or 2000, they started reporting their data in 2010 or 2020. It doesn't mean that they never existed in these communities prior to that time. It was just that they started reporting later. It could also be that there are people that are transferring into these states, that they are moving from other states where they were evangelicals and they're joining evangelical churches. So that's going to increase the number of people that would be considered evangelical in these communities. The third and the most encouraging would be conversion growth, and that is those who are hearing the gospel shared, they're repenting of their sin, they're placing their faith in Christ. This would be a very encouraging thing to see all of this growth happening through conversion growth, but the verdict is still out until additional research is done on these areas. But I leave you with this information to say, hey, something's happening here, and we need to turn our attentions to these areas. Okay, so how can you access this information? So I put in the description below the Excel file. Take it, use it for your research, use it to share with other people. The other thing that you'll find there is the information for the infographics. Take those, give those away, use those to cast vision, use them to develop your own articles as well, your blog posts on these particular areas. Now, the other thing I want to draw your attention to, and I think that this is the most important aspect of what we have been doing and what I'm sharing with you on this video, and that is this resource that is actually housed at the Diaspora Missions Collective, dmcollective.org. If you go there and you click on their map gallery and you scroll down to where it says the map of the least evangelical states, counties, and metros in the U.S., you can have access to this interactive map, or I'll just put the direct link below. But this is a fantastic resource, and shout out to Brent Waldrop and his team for working with this. They took our data and they developed this interactive resource that can really benefit us as we think about what's going on in our context. And again, being able to overlap the areas, these least reached areas with where the foreign-born populations reside, can really begin to help us think about the potential for unreached people groups that have migrated to some of these areas as well when it comes to our church planting opportunities. So folks, thanks so much for checking out this video. I hope that you will use these resources, you will put them together, allow them to guide your strategy as you prayerfully seek the Lord's face on where He wants you to go in days to come. Give these things away. I know I've said that 2 or 3 times already in this video, but really in your social networks, sharing this information, help spread this information into other places among other ministries can be a significant part of getting the gospel into these communities as well as beyond. Thanks.